The war beast inspected every cadet, then bowed before the human Part 1. The inspection, the planet Voraxis Prime, was not a place where anyone went to rest. It was not a place for peace or quiet or calm nights under soft stars. It was a place built for one single purpose: to make soldiers. The sky above it was dark and heavy, filled with thick clouds that never seemed to move. The ground was hard and cold, made of black stone that stretched in every direction. And somewhere in the middle of it all, rising up like a giant fist punching into the sky, stood the Academy of Voraxes. Jake Cooper had been staring at it for 10 minutes now. He still could not believe he was here. He was 22 years old. He was not tall. He was not built like a war machine. He did not have claws or armored skin or teeth that could tear through metal. He was just a human, a plain, ordinary human from a small town in Ohio, with brown hair that never stayed neat and a habit of biting his thumbnail when he was nervous. And right now, standing at the base of the largest military academy in the known galaxy, surrounded by aliens who looked like they could snap him in half without even trying, he was very nervous indeed. The other cadets around him were massive. There were creatures with 4 arms and skin like rough stone. There were tall, thin beings with long necks and eyes that glowed faint blue in the dark. There were stocky warriors covered in thick scales, their bodies built like tanks. Every single one of them looked like they were born to fight. Jake looked like he had walked into the wrong building. A large alien named Grell, who came from a species called the Vorthan, glanced down at Jake and grunted. The Vorthan were one of the most feared species in the galaxy. They stood nearly 8 feet tall, with broad shoulders and arms thick as tree trunks. Grell looked at Jake the way someone might look at a small insect that had crawled onto their boot. "You are the human," Grell said. It was not a question. "Yeah," Jake said. "That is me." Grell stared at him for a moment longer, then turned away without another word. Jake let out a slow breath. He had learned in his first week at the academy that most aliens did not say much to him. They did not hate him, exactly. They just did not understand why he was there. And honestly, some days Jake did not fully understand it either. But he had a reason. A good one. And he held on to it every single day. The academy had accepted him through a program called the Open Gate Initiative. It was a new idea, one that allowed beings from any species, no matter how weak or small they might seem, to earn a place among the stars. Earth had only joined the galactic community a few years before. Humans were still new, still unknown. And Jake had been chosen as one of the first humans to try. He had not been chosen because he was the strongest, or the fastest, or the most skilled with a weapon. He had been chosen because he scored higher than anyone else on one small test, a test about understanding others, about reading emotions, about knowing when someone was afraid or sad or lost. The people who ran the program had seen something in that score, something they thought was worth watching. Jake did not know all of that yet. He only knew that he was here and that tomorrow was the day of the inspection. Every cadet at the Academy of Voraxes went through it. Once a year, the oldest and most terrifying tradition of the Academy took place. It was called the Inspection of Worth. And at the center of it was a creature that most beings in the galaxy had only heard about in old stories, the Krathval. No one knew exactly how old the Krathval was. Some said it was hundreds of years old. Others said it was older than the Academy itself. What everyone agreed on was this: it was massive, it was ancient, and it could see things that no other being could see. The Krathval was a war beast. It had been bred long ago by a civilization that no longer existed, created for one single job: to look into the heart of a warrior and judge what was truly there. Not strength, not skill, not speed. Something deeper, something that could not be faked or practiced or learned from a book. The beast would walk through the ranks of the new cadets one by one and stop in front of each of them. It would look into their eyes. And in that moment it would know everything. Every cadet who did not have what the beast was searching for would simply fall. Their legs would give out, their body would go weak. They would drop to the ground, not from pain, but from the sheer weight of the beast's presence crushing their will. It had happened to cadets from the strongest species in the galaxy. It did not matter how big you were, it did not matter how many battles you had fought. If what the beast was looking for was not inside you, you would fall. And in all of recorded history, thousands and thousands of years, the Krathval had never bowed before a single cadet. Not once. Jake learned all of this the night before the inspection. He was sitting alone in the small room he shared with 2 other cadets, both of whom were asleep, their bodies taking up most of the space. Jake sat on the edge of his thin bed, his back against the cold wall, and listened as an older cadet named Astric Riley Riley was also human. She had been at the academy for 2 years and had already survived her own inspection. She sat across from Jake, her legs crossed, and spoke in a calm, quiet voice. "It is not going to hurt you," Riley said. "It does not attack. It does not bite. It just looks at you. But when it looks at you, you will feel everything. Every fear you have ever had. Every doubt. Everything you have ever tried to hide." Jake nodded slowly. "And if I fall?" "Then you are sent home," Riley said. "No second chances." Jake was quiet for a long time after that. He looked at his hands, small, ordinary hands, and thought about why he had come here in the first place. He thought about the people back on Earth who were counting on him, not just his family. Everyone. Every human being who was hoping that someone, somewhere, could show the galaxy that humans were worth something. He did not sleep much that night. The next morning came fast and cold. The cadets were lined up in a wide-open field behind the main tower of the academy. Thousands of them stood in long rows, shoulder to shoulder, perfectly still. The sky above was dark, as always. The wind blew cold across the stone ground, and then the gates at the far end of the field opened. The Krathval stepped out. Jake had heard it described. He had seen pictures. But nothing at all could have prepared him for the real thing. It was enormous, easily the size of a small building. Its body was covered in dark, heavy armor that looked like it had grown from its own skin. Its legs were thick and powerful, and each step it took made the ground shake just a little. Its head was low and wide, with 2 eyes that burned a deep, steady gold. Those eyes did not blink. They did not move quickly. They moved slowly, carefully, the way a predator's eyes move when it is reading the land. The beast began to walk along the first row of cadets. It stopped in front of a tall, armored warrior from the Drekka species. The warrior stood perfectly straight, jaw set, fists clenched. The Krathval looked at him for 3 full seconds. Then the warrior's knees buckled. He did not fall completely. He caught himself. But everyone saw it. The weakness. The crack. The beast moved on. One by one, the Krathval moved down the rows. Some cadets held steady. Others stumbled. A few dropped entirely and had to be carried away. The beast did not pause for long with most of them. It looked, it judged, and it moved forward. And then it reached Jake. Jake stood at the end of a row, small and still among creatures twice his size. The Krathval stopped in front of him. The golden eyes turned and fixed on him, and stayed. The seconds stretched out like hours. Jake felt it. The weight, the pressure. It was like the entire sky was pushing down on his chest. Every fear he had ever carried, fear of failing, fear of not being enough, fear of letting everyone down, all of it rose up inside him at once, loud and sharp and real. But underneath all of that, there was something else, something quiet, something steady. He thought about why he was here. Not for glory, not for himself. For the people he loved, for the ones who needed someone to stand up when it was hard. He did not fall. The Krathval stared at him for a long, long time. The entire field went silent. No one moved. No one breathed. And then, slowly, the great war beast lowered its massive head. It bowed. The war beast inspected every cadet, then bowed before the human part 2, the beast's eyes. The footage played for the 4th time on the small screen inside Commander Lyra Voss's office. She sat in her chair, arms crossed, and watched it again. The same moment. The same image. The Krathval, the most feared war beast in the known galaxy, lowering its massive head before a young human boy who barely reached its chest. Lyra paused the footage. She stared at the frozen image for a long time. Then she played it again. Lyra Voss was not someone who surprised easily. She had been in the military for 19 years. She had seen battles that would have broken most people. She had walked onto ships that were falling apart and walked off them alive. She had earned her rank not through luck or family name, but through one simple thing. She never looked away from the hard truth, no matter how ugly it was. And right now, the hard truth was sitting right in front of her on that screen, and she did not know what to make of it. She was one of the very few humans ever to hold the rank of commander in the Academy of Voraxis. It had taken her 12 years of work to get there. 12 years of proving, again and again, that humans were not weak, that they were not soft, that they belonged among the stars just as much as any other species. And now, in one single moment, a 22-year-old kid from Ohio had done something that no one in 3,000 years of history had ever done. Lyra turned off the screen and leaned back in her chair. She rubbed her eyes with both hands and let out a long breath. "Well," she said to herself quietly, "what in the world did you do, kid? The next morning, Lyra called for a full review of the Krathval's history. She had access to the oldest records kept at the Academy, files that most cadets never saw, stored deep in the lower levels of the main tower. She spent the entire day going through them, reading page after page of old reports, old studies, old notes left behind by scholars who had spent their whole lives trying to understand the beast. Most of what she read was familiar. The Krathval had been bred by a civilization called the Aethon, a species that had vanished from the galaxy long before anyone alive today could remember. The Aethon were not warriors in the way most people understood the word. They did not fight for land or power or glory. They fought because they believed that true strength was not about what you could do to others. It was about what you were willing to do for them. The Aethon had created the Krathval to find that kind of strength. The beast could look into the heart of any living being and see what was really driving them. Was it fear? Was it anger? Was it pride? Or was it something else? Something rare and deep and difficult to find. Most war species in the galaxy, she learned, developed their courage through rage. They fought because they were angry. They pushed forward because the fire inside them burned hot and loud. And that kind of courage was real. It was powerful. The Krathval could see it, and it respected it. But it did not bow before it. Not once. Not ever. Because that was not what the beast was looking for. Lyra found the answer in an old note, written by an Aethon scholar thousands of years ago. The words were simple, but they hit her like a weight in the chest. Beast bows only before courage that is born from love, not from rage. Not from duty. Not from pride. From love. The kind of courage that does not ask for anything in return. The kind that stands up not because it wants to win, but because it cannot bear to let someone else lose. Lyra read those words 3 times. Then she set the file down and sat in silence for a long while. She thought about humans. She thought about what made them different from every other species she had ever served with. It was not their strength. It was not their speed or their technology or their weapons. It was something quieter than all of those things. Something that most other species did not fully understand because they had never seen it in quite the same way. Humans loved fiercely. And when the people they loved were in danger, when someone they cared about was suffering or afraid or lost, humans would do almost anything. They would walk into fire. They would face down something 10 times their size. They would give up everything they had without hesitation, without thinking about the cost, just to protect the ones who mattered to them. That was not weakness. That was not softness. That was the rarest kind of courage in the universe. Lyra stood up from her desk and walked to the window. Outside, the dark sky of Voraxis Prime stretched out in every direction, heavy and still. Somewhere out there, in one of the cadet barracks, a young human named Jake was probably sitting alone, not fully understanding what he had just done. Not understanding that he had just changed something. She needed to talk to him. But first, she needed to understand one more thing. She went back to the files and searched for every record of the Krathval's inspections over the last 3,000 years. She wanted to see if there had ever been even a small sign, a hesitation, a pause, anything at all, that suggested the beast had come close to bowing before. She read through hundreds of reports, thousands of names. Species after species, nothing. Not once. Not even close. Until Jake. Lyra closed the file and sat back down. She folded her hands on the desk and stared at the wall for a long time, thinking. She had spent her whole career fighting for humans, fighting to prove they belonged, fighting to earn respect in a galaxy that had for a very long time looked down on her species. And now, without even trying, without even knowing what he was doing, a young man had earned something that no amount of fighting could have ever given them. Respect that did not have to be demanded. Respect that was simply given. Later that evening, Lyra walked through the long hallways of the academy toward the cadet barracks. The halls were quiet. Most cadets were inside their rooms, resting or training or studying. A few nodded at her as she passed. She nodded back, but her mind was somewhere else. She found Jake sitting outside on a flat piece of stone near the edge of the training yard. The sky above was dark as always, but a few faint stars had broken through the clouds. He was looking up at them, his hands resting on his knees, and he looked very small against the vast black above him. Lyra sat down next to him. She did not say anything at first. They both sat in silence for a while, watching the stars. Then Jake spoke, without looking at her. "Everyone is staring at me," he said. His voice was quiet. "I do not know what I did." Lyra looked at him for a moment. She thought about everything she had read that day, about the Aethon, about the beast, About the kind of courage that could not be taught or trained or faked. "You did not do anything special, Jake," she said gently. "You just stood there and were exactly who you are." Jake turned to look at her. His face was confused, a little worried. "But what does that mean?" he asked. Lyra smiled, just a little. It was the kind of smile that held a lot of weight behind it, the kind that came from someone who had just seen something they had been waiting a very long time to see. "It means," she said, "that the universe just learned something new about humans, and trust me, it is going to be talking about this for a very long time." Jake looked back up at the stars. He did not fully understand yet, but somewhere deep inside him, in the same quiet place where his courage lived, something stirred. Something small and warm and steady, and, on the other side of the academy, behind heavy doors that no cadet ever opened, the Craft Vol sat alone in the dark. Its golden eyes were open, and they were looking in the direction of Jake Cooper. The war beast inspected every cadet, then bowed before the human Part 3. The Ripple news travels fast in space. Faster than light, faster than ships, faster than anything. A single event on one small planet can reach the far edges of the galaxy in less than a day. And what had happened on Vorax's Prime, a war beast bowing before a human cadet for the first time in 3,000 years, was not the kind of story that people kept to themselves. Within 2 days, every major news station across the galaxy was talking about Jake Cooper. Some of them called it a mistake, a one-time thing that meant nothing. Others called it a sign, proof that humans were rising to become something important in the galaxy. A few called it dangerous. They said that if a creature like the Krathval could be moved by a simple human, then maybe humans were not as weak as everyone had always assumed. And that idea made some species very uncomfortable. Inside the Academy of Voraxis, the ripple was even stronger. Jake could feel it everywhere he went. When he walked through the hallways, cadets would stop talking and watch him pass. Some looked at him with curiosity. Others looked at him with something close to fear. A few simply looked away, as if they did not want to admit that a small human had done something their strongest warriors never could. Jake tried not to let it bother him. He kept his head down. He went to his training sessions. He ate his meals alone at the far end of the dining hall where fewer cadets sat. He did not seek attention. He did not talk about what had happened. He just tried to move through his days the way he always had, quietly and without making a fuss. But the fuss came to him anyway. It happened on the 5th day after the inspection. Jake was sitting in the open training yard, stretching before his morning session. The yard was wide and flat, made of the same black stone as everything else on Voraxis Prime. A few other cadets were scattered around, warming up or talking in small groups. The air was cold as always, and the sky above was thick with dark clouds. Jake was tightening the strap on his boot when a shadow fell over him. A large shadow. He looked up. Dorn stood in front of him. Dorn was Vorthan, the same species as Grell, the one who had looked at Jake during the first week and said nothing. But Dorn was not like Grell. Grell had simply ignored Jake. Dorn did not believe in ignoring things he disagreed with. Dorn believed in confronting them, head-on, loud and clear, so that everyone around could see. Dorn was tall, nearly 8 feet, with broad shoulders and arms that looked like they had been carved from stone. His skin was a dark gray, and across his chest he wore a plate of armor that he had earned in his 2nd year at the academy. His eyes were small and sharp, and right now they were fixed on Jake with something that looked very much like anger. "So you are the human," Dorn said. His voice was deep and rough, like gravel being stirred. Jake stood up slowly. He did not rush. He brushed the dust off his knees and looked up at Dorn. The size difference between them was almost funny. "Almost, yes," Jake said. "I am." Dorn took a step closer. He did not raise his fists, but his body was tense, like a spring pulled tight and ready to snap. The other cadets in the yard had stopped what they were doing. They were watching now. All of them. "The beast bowed before you," Dorn said. It was not a question. It was a challenge. The way Dorn said it, it sounded like an insult, like he was saying something ridiculous out loud just to show everyone how absurd it was. He kept his voice calm, steady. Not because he was trying to seem brave, he just did not see the point in raising it. Dorn leaned down so that his face was closer to Jake's. His breath was warm and sharp in the cold air. "I have trained since I was 4 years old," Dorn said. "My people have fought wars for generations. We have bled. We have died. We have earned our place in this galaxy with our own hands." He paused. "And you, a creature with no claws, no armor, no strength, you get a bow from the Krath Vow. Why?" The yard was completely silent now. Every eye was on Jake. Jake looked at Dorn for a long moment. He did not look away. He did not flinch. He did not get angry. He just stopped for a second quietly, and then he spoke. "I do not know why the beast chose to bow," Jake said. "I did not ask it to. I did not do anything special. I just stood there." Dorn made a low sound in his throat, something between a growl and a laugh. "You just stood there," he repeated, as if the words themselves were proof of how weak Jake was. "Yes," Jake said, "but I will tell you something, Dorn. I did not stand there because I was brave. I stood there because I could not fall. Not because of myself, because of the people back home who were counting on me. My mother, my little sister, my friends. Every human being on Earth who is hoping that someone out here can show the galaxy that we are worth something." Jake paused. He looked Dorn in the eye. "That is why I did not fall, not because I am strong, because I love them, and I was not going to let them down." The yard stayed silent. Dorn stared at Jake. Something shifted in his expression. Something small and quick that he tried to hide. It was not anger anymore. It was something else. Something closer to confusion. Like Jake had just said, words in a language that Dorn almost understood, but not quite. Dorn straightened up. He did not say anything else. He turned and walked away, back toward the far side of the yard, and the other cadets parted to let him pass. No one spoke. The moment hung in the air like smoke after a fire. Jake let out a slow breath and sat back down on the ground. His hands were shaking just a little, not from fear, from the effort of keeping everything steady on the outside, when, on the inside, everything was loud and tangled and real. That evening, Jake was alone in a small room he shared with 2 other cadets. Both of them were out, one at a training drill, the other at the mess hall. Jake sat on his bed, his back against the wall, staring at the ceiling. The room was dim and quiet. The only light came from a small lamp near the door. The door opened and a man stepped in. He was human, about 35, with short dark hair and a calm face. He wore the uniform of a lieutenant. Neat, pressed, well-kept. His name was Cole Harrington. He was one of the few human officers at the academy, and he had been assigned as Jake's mentor since the day Jake arrived. Cole closed the door behind him and sat down on the edge of the other bed, facing Jake. He did not smile. His expression was serious, but not unkind. "I heard about what happened in the yard today," Cole said. Jake nodded. "Word gets around fast." "Faster than you think," Cole said. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Jake, I need you to listen to me carefully. What you did out there, the way you handled Dorn, that was good. You did the right thing. You did not start a fight. That matters. But," Cole held his gaze, "but there are people watching you now. Not just cadets, not just people here at the academy. People out there, powerful people from species all over the galaxy. They are watching what happens to you. Some of them are curious. Some of them want to see you succeed." He paused. "And some of them do not." Jake felt something cold settle in his chest. "What do you mean?" Cole sat back. He looked at Jake with an expression that was honest and a little heavy, the kind of look that said he wished he did not have to say what he was about to say. "I mean that you have become important, Jake, whether you wanted to or not, and important things attract attention. Not all of it is friendly." He stood up and moved toward the door. Before he stepped out, he turned back. "Just be careful, and keep doing what you are doing. Stay yourself. That is the only thing that is going to keep you safe out here." Cole left. The door closed. Jake sat alone in the dim room for a long time after that. He thought about Dorn. He thought about what Cole had said. He thought about the stars he had seen that night with Commander Voss, and about the people back on Earth who were so far away and yet so close inside his heart. And somewhere, deep inside the academy, behind doors that never opened, the Krathval sat in the dark. Its golden eyes were open. And they were still watching. The War Beast inspected every cadet, then bowed before the human Part 4, the Rift Walk. The council met on the 9th day after the inspection. The room where they gathered was deep inside the main tower of the academy, far below ground level, where the air was cold and still and the walls were made of old dark stone. There were no windows. There was no natural light. Just a single large table in the center of the room, shaped like a circle, and 12 chairs around it, one for each species that held a seat on the governing council of Voraxis. Each chair was filled. Representatives from 12 different species sat in silence, their faces hard to read. Some had skin like metal, some had eyes that moved in different directions at the same time. One had no face at all, just a smooth, flat surface where features should have been, and yet somehow everyone in the room could feel that it was listening. At the head of the table stood Commander Lyra Voss. She was the only human in the room. She stood straight and still, her hands folded behind her back, and she waited. The one who spoke first was a tall, thin creature named Counselor Verith. Verith came from a species called the Sari. They were old, older than almost any other species still alive in the galaxy. Their skin was pale and dry, like old paper, and their voices sounded like wind blowing through dry leaves. "The human cadet," Verath said slowly. "The one the beast bowed before. He must be tested." No one disagreed. The council had been talking about Jake for days, through private channels and secret meetings. Some of them were impressed by what had happened. Others were worried. A war beast bowing before someone was not just a moment. It was a statement. It told the entire galaxy that this one being, this small, ordinary human, carried something inside him that the universe had been searching for a very long time. And if that was true, then the council needed to know just how deep it went. They decided on the Rift Walk. The Rift Walk was not a normal test. It was not like the training drills that cadets did every day, running, fighting, solving problems under pressure. The Rift Walk was something far older and far more dangerous. It was a solo survival simulation held inside a chamber deep beneath the academy, where the environment was completely controlled by an ancient system that no one fully understood anymore. Inside the Rift Walk, the simulation created a world, a real feeling world with ground and sky and weather and dangers. But it was not just physical. The simulation could read the mind of the person inside it. It could find their fears, their doubts, their loneliness, and it would use all of those things against them, again and again, until the person either found a way through or broke apart completely. Every cadet who had ever entered the Rift Walk had done one of two things. They had fought their way through it, using strength, speed, and willpower to force past every danger the simulation put in front of them. Or they had given up. There was no middle ground. There was no other way. At least that is what everyone believed. Jake was told about the Rift Walk the morning after the council made their decision. Cole Harrington came to find him in the training yard. Jake could see it in Cole's face before he even spoke. Something was wrong. Or, not wrong exactly. Something was heavy. "They want you to do the Rift Walk," Cole said. Jake had heard of it. Every cadet had. He knew what it was. He knew how hard it was. He knew that some of the strongest warriors in the galaxy had gone in and come out broken. "When?" Jake asked. 3 days, Cole said. Jake nodded. He did not say anything for a moment. Then he asked the one question that mattered most to him. "Can I come back from it? If things go wrong, is there a way out?" Cole looked at him. His expression was honest, the way it always was. "There is a way out if you make it through. If you do not make it through, they will pull you out." "But Jake, no one has ever come out of the Rift Walk without finishing it. Not once. If you do not finish, it is over for you." Jake understood. He spent the next 3 days preparing. Not by training harder or practicing with weapons. He spent them thinking. Talking to Riley, who had been through the Rift Walk herself 2 years ago. Talking to Cole. And spending long hours alone, sitting on the cold stone near the edge of the training yard, looking up at the dark sky and thinking about the people back home. On the morning of the Rift Walk, the academy was quiet. Word had spread, quietly, through whispers and small conversations, that the human cadet was going in. Most cadets had heard about it. Many of them had gathered in small groups near the entrance of the underground chamber, not to cheer or shout, but just to watch, to see what would happen. He stood near the back, arms crossed, saying nothing. His face was unreadable. Jake walked into the chamber alone. The entrance was a wide round door made of heavy metal, and it opened with a deep, low sound that echoed through the hallway. Beyond it was a long, narrow path that went straight down into darkness. The air was different down here, thick and warm, almost alive. He walked down the path until he reached the center of the chamber. It was a large, open space, round, like the inside of a bowl. The walls curved up on all sides, smooth and dark. There was no light except for a faint glow coming from the floor itself, a pale blue that pulsed slowly like a heartbeat. Jake stood in the middle of the room and waited. The simulation began without warning. The floor beneath him shifted. The walls moved. The dark room stretched and changed, and in seconds Jake was no longer standing in an underground chamber. He was standing on a wide open plain under a gray sky. The ground beneath his feet was dry and cracked. There was no wind, no sound at all. Just silence and emptiness stretching out in every direction. Then the fear came. It did not come as a monster or a weapon or a physical threat. It came as a feeling, deep, cold, and heavy, that pressed into his chest and stayed there. A feeling that said, "You are alone. No one is coming. No one knows you are here, and you are not strong enough to survive this." Jake stood still. He breathed slowly. He let the feeling wash over him without fighting it. And then the simulation changed again. Figures appeared on the plane. Shadows, dark, shapeless, moving slowly toward him from every direction. They did not attack, they did not speak. They just moved closer, one step at a time, and as they got closer, the feeling of fear and loneliness grew stronger. Other cadets, when they reached this point, would either charge forward and fight the shadows with everything they had, or they would freeze and eventually collapse. Jake did neither. He sat down. He sat right there on the cracked, dry ground, in the middle of all those shadows, and he just sat. The shadows kept moving closer. The fear kept growing, but Jake did not move. He closed his eyes and breathed, and then something strange happened. The shadows stopped. Jake opened his eyes. The dark figures were frozen in place, all around him, like statues, and then, one by one, they began to change. The shapeless darkness slowly took on form. They became smaller, quieter. And Jake realized, not with his mind, but with something deeper, something in his gut, that the shadows were not enemies. They were not weapons the simulation had built to destroy him. They were parts of the simulation itself. Parts of it that were in pain. The simulation was not just a program. It was something old. Something that had been running for thousands of years, trapping fear inside it, feeding on doubt and loneliness, and it had grown heavy with all of it. It was suffering. In its own strange, silent way, it was suffering. Jake stood up. He looked at the nearest shadow, now small, now still, now almost trembling. He took one step toward it, then another. He reached out his hand slowly and placed it gently against the shadow. The moment he touched it, the plane shook. A sound rose up from the ground. Not a roar, not an explosion, but something quiet. Something like a long breath being let out after holding it for a very, very long time. The shadows began to fade. One by one, they dissolved into the air like smoke disappearing in wind. The gray sky above him slowly turned lighter. The cracked ground beneath him softened. And the fear, the cold, heavy feeling that had been sitting in his chest since the simulation began, lifted away, like a hand being removed from his shoulder. The plane went white. Then it went still. Then it was gone. Jake was standing back in the underground chamber. The round room. The pale blue glow on the floor, pulsing like a heartbeat, but slower now. Calmer. Almost peaceful. The simulation was over. And Jake had not fought his way through it. He had healed it. Above ground, in a viewing room where the council and dozens of cadets watched the simulation on screens, no one spoke. The screens showed everything. Every moment, every step Jake had taken, and every single person in that room understood what they had just seen, something no one had ever seen before. Counselor Verath, the old Sari, sat back in his chair. His pale, dry face showed no expression, but his voice, when he finally spoke, was very quiet, and it carried something that it had not carried before. "Interesting," Verath said. "Very interesting indeed." In the back of the viewing room, Dorn stood alone. His arms were no longer crossed. His hands hung at his sides. And on his face, for the first time since Jake had arrived at the academy, there was no anger at all. There was only one thing left. Wonder. The war beast inspected every cadet, then bowed before the human Part 5. The council met again 3 days after the Rift Walk. This time the room felt different. The same 12 chairs. The same round table. The same cold, still air deep beneath the tower. But something had shifted. The way the counselors sat, the way they looked at each other, the way the silence hung in the room before anyone spoke, all of it was heavier than before. Not with anger or fear, with something else. Something closer to awe. Counselor Verath was the first to speak, the way he always was. His dry, wind-like voice filled the room slowly, each word placed with care. "The human survived the Rift Walk," Verath said. "But he did not survive it the way anyone else ever has. He did not fight. He did not force his way through. He found a way to reach the simulation itself, something that has been running for over 2,000 years, and he calmed it. He stopped it from the inside, not with strength, but with understanding. No one interrupted. Every counselor in the room had watched the footage.
They had all seen it.
And none of them had words for it yet. Vareth paused and looked around the table. I am not against humans, he said, carefully. But I am old, and I have seen many things in my life that looked important at first and turned out to mean nothing. So I want to be sure. I want the whole galaxy to be sure. I want one final moment. One moment that cannot be argued with. One moment that cannot be called a trick or a mistake. He looked at the others. I want the Krathvel brought back. One more time. Before the full academy. Before a live broadcast. Let the beast see the human again, and let everyone watch what happens. The room was quiet for a long time after that. Then, one by one, each counselor nodded. The decision was made. The news spread through the academy within hours. The Krathval would return. Jake Cooper would stand before it again. And this time, thousands of cadets would watch in person, and millions more across the galaxy would watch on live broadcast. Jake found out from Cole the way he always did. Cole came to find him in the evening after dinner when Jake was sitting alone on the flat stone near the edge of the training yard. The sky was dark, as always. A few stars had broken through the clouds, faint and cold. Cole sat down next to him and told him everything. Jake listened without interrupting. When Cole finished, Jake sat in silence for a while, looking up at the stars. Are you afraid? Cole asked. Jake thought about it, really thought about it, the way he always did before he answered anything. Then he shook his head. No, he said. Not really. I was afraid the first time, but now I know what the beast sees, and I know what is inside me. That has not changed. Cole looked at him for a moment. Then he nodded, slowly. Good, he said. Because a lot of people are going to be watching you, Jake. Not just here. All over the galaxy. Jake smiled, just a little. It was a quiet smile. Tired, but real. Then I hope they see something good, he said. The day of the second appearance came fast. The arena was enormous. It was the largest open space on the entire planet of Voraxis Prime, a vast round field of black stone surrounded on all sides by tall tiered stands that rose up like the walls of a bowl. Thousands of cadets filled those stands, packed shoulder to shoulder, species after species, all of them silent and still. The dark sky stretched above them, heavy and close, as if the clouds themselves had come down to watch. At the far end of the arena, the council sat in a raised platform, 12 chairs in a row, each counselor visible to everyone below. Counselor Vareth sat in the center, his pale face calm and unreadable. Commander Lyra Voss stood near the edge of the platform, just behind the council. Her arms were crossed. Her face was steady. But her eyes were bright. She had waited a long time for this moment. Not just for Jake. For every human who had ever been looked down upon, pushed aside, or told they did not belong. In the stands, Dorn sat near the front. He was not with any group. He sat alone, leaning forward, his large hands resting on his knees. His face was open, calm. Very different from the angry, proud warrior who had challenged Jake in the training yard just days before. Riley sat a few rows behind him, next to a handful of other human cadets. She was quiet, her eyes fixed on the arena below. And in the center of the arena, standing alone on the flat black stone, was Jake. He wore no armor, no weapon, nothing special at all. Just his regular uniform, plain and simple, the same thing every cadet wore. He stood with his hands at his sides, his back straight, and he looked small. Very small. Against the vastness of the arena and the thousands of eyes watching him, he looked like a single leaf on an endless dark ocean. But he did not look afraid. The gates at the far end of the arena opened. The sound they made was deep and heavy, and it echoed across the entire field. Every single person in the stands went silent. The air itself seemed to change. Thicker, colder, charged with something that could not be named but could be felt by everyone present. And then the Krathval stepped out. It moved slowly. Each step was deliberate, heavy, and powerful. The ground shook just a little with every footfall. Its massive body was covered in dark armor that looked like it had grown from its own skin, and its head was low, wide, and ancient. Its golden eyes, steady, burning, alive, swept across the arena once, taking in everything. The cadets, the council, the sky, all of it. Then those golden eyes turned to Jake. The beast began to walk toward him. The distance between them was not large, maybe 50 steps. But the craft moved slowly, and every single step felt like it carried the weight of thousands of years. The silence in the arena was total. No one breathed. No one moved. The only sound was the slow, steady rhythm of the beast's footsteps on the black stone. Jake stood perfectly still. He watched the craft owl come toward him. He did not flinch. He did not shift his weight. He did not look away. He just stood there, the way he had the first time, and he let the beast see him. The craft owl stopped directly in front of him. It was so close now that its shadow covered Jake completely. The beast towered above him, massive, ancient, terrifying in every way that a creature could be terrifying. Its golden eyes looked down at Jake, and Jake looked up. The seconds stretched out. 1, 2, 3, 5. The arena was so quiet that the sound of the wind against the far wall could be heard. 6, 7, 8. Jake did not move. He did not speak. He did not try to do anything at all. He simply stood there and was exactly who he was. A young man from a small town on a quiet planet, far away from everything he had ever known, standing in front of something ancient and powerful and real. And inside him, in that same quiet, steady place where his courage had always lived, there was no fear. There was only love for the people he had left behind, for the life he carried with him, for the simple, stubborn belief that it was worth standing up, even when the whole universe was watching, even when he was small, even when no one would have blamed him for falling. 9, 10. The Krathvil lowered its head. Not a small dip. Not a quick nod. A full, deep bow, the great beast bending its massive body forward, its head dropping low, holding the position in silence. The golden eyes stayed open. They stayed fixed on Jake, and they held something in them that had not been there during any inspection in 3,000 years of history. Recognition. The arena erupted, not with cheering at first, with gasps. With the sound of thousands of beings drawing breath at the same moment, a single sharp intake of air that rose up from the stands like a wave, and then, slowly, the sound changed. Cadets from dozens of species began to stand up, one by one, then in groups, then all at once, rising to their feet not because anyone told them to, but because something inside them demanded it. Dorn was one of the first to stand. He rose from his seat, his large frame straight and tall, and he did not look away from the arena floor. His face was not angry. It was not proud. It was open and quiet and full of something that looked very much like understanding. Like a door inside him had finally opened and light was coming through it for the first time. Up on the platform, Counselor Varath sat perfectly still. He watched the beast hold its bow. He watched the cadets rise. He watched Jake Cooper, small, ordinary, human Jake Cooper, standing in the center of it all, calm and quiet and real. Then Varath turned to the broadcast screen beside him. Millions of beings across the galaxy were watching. Every word he said now would be heard by all of them. He spoke clearly, slowly, so that every single one of them could hear. "This is not about strength," Varath said. "This is not about war. This is about something the universe has been looking for a very long time. Something that cannot be built. Something that cannot be trained. Something that can only be carried quietly and without asking for anything in return." He paused.
He looked back at Jake. "Humans carry it."
And tonight, the oldest judge in the galaxy has told us so. The Krathval held its bow for a long time. Longer than anyone expected. Longer than any record had ever shown. It held it, steady and still, like a promise being kept. And then slowly it raised its head. It looked at Jake one more time. The golden eyes were calm, warm even, as warm as ancient, burning gold could be. And Jake looked back at the beast. He did not smile. He did not raise his fist or shout or do anything that the moment might have called for. He simply nodded. A small nod. A quiet one. The kind of nod that passed between two beings who understood each other, not because they shared words or history or blood, but because they shared something deeper than all of those things. The Krathval turned, slowly, and began to walk back toward the gate. Its steps were steady, its head was high, and as it moved away from Jake, it did not look back. It did not need to. It had already seen everything it needed to see. Jake stood alone in the center of the arena for a long time after the beast was gone. The stands were still full. The cadets were still on their feet. The broadcast was still live. Millions of eyes across the galaxy were still watching, but Jake was not thinking about any of that. He was thinking about home. about the morning light on his mother's kitchen table, about his little sister laughing at something small and silly, about the quiet, simple life he had left behind to come to this cold, dark planet on the other side of the stars. He closed his eyes and breathed in the cold air of Voraxis Prime, and for the first time since he had arrived, it did not feel so foreign. It felt like a place where he belonged.